and welcome to today's Criterion Learning Series on the Affordable Care Act reporting. Thank you for joining us today. Do want to mention that we do have people available to answer questions. If you do have any questions, we have a chat or a Q&A that you can use to ask any questions you might have. If you do have any issues with audio, I know I've had some issues, I think, last time, and want to make sure that we don't lose anybody. So please let us know right away in the chat if there's any issues or even a Q&A. But let's go ahead and get started on this. So I do want to first off mention that if you have any questions regarding taxes, like the taxability of incomes, deductions, things like that, please consult with your accountant, a tax advisor, or tax consultant. Support cannot provide any tax advice. What we can do is help you to set up things in the system based off of the advice from those people, like your accountants. So we're here to help you, but we're not going to give you that professional advice like that. So just want to mention that. Let's go ahead and switch over to my browser here. So just give me 1 second. All right, you should be able to see my browser. Of course, we're talking about the Affordable Care Act. Now, this is not really anything you're going to be doing in self-service per se. This is something that basically you're going to be doing in the setup of the system and in the back end in HR. So that's where we're going to go over to HR, and we're going to do the setup over here. So, of course, what we're looking at when we're looking at the Affordable Care Act is the employees and their coverage and things like that. So I want to start off with employee data. This is obviously important information to have on your employees. You should hopefully have things like the correct social security numbers and addresses and names and so forth. But I know sometimes, especially if you're doing payroll or ACA forms, you might get feedback from your employees that there's something wrong, like their social is wrong or their address is wrong or you misspelled their name. You know, they didn't mention it all throughout the year. They got all those paychecks, never mentioned it. But, you know, you find out when they go to file their taxes or something like that. So to fix that stuff, of course, you can go to an employee record. And for an example, on the demographic screen, you've got their name. So perhaps you misspelled their name or something like that. And you do have their social security number. So, you know, they can go in there, you can fix, you know, whatever might be wrong with the social security number if they tell you something is wrong with that information. And of course, the address screen here. Now, these may be things that you allow your employees to edit in self-service. So, you know, it's possible that they could just go in and fix that in self-service, and maybe you have a workflow in place for them to, you know, get approved, at least notify you that there was a change done. So you might empower your employees to fix that. And of course, if they do fix it after you got the form, so then they don't tell you, then, you know, that might be on them to tell you, hey, my social was wrong, I fixed it. But just because they fix it doesn't necessarily like trigger the system and generate another form for them. So just be aware that you might have to go in and recreate forms for people who had a problem like their social or something. All right, so that's the employee information. Now the other part would be benefits. Now, you know, you got your benefit plans and stuff like that. That, you know, were they enrolled and stuff in the year. So you're going to want to make sure that benefit information is correct on the employees. I'm not sure if he has any benefits for this year, but of course, you know, you can look at your previous year's benefits. Let's find somebody who does have benefits. I believe Ted has benefits. All right. So you'll see the benefit plans in here. Now, you may need to toggle this to show inactive if perhaps they waived coverage or something in the current year, or maybe they changed plans on January 1st and you want to see the information was correct for last year, or check the dates of those types of things. So you may need to toggle this show inactive to show those older plans. So you can just go into the plan. I'll just pick one and just make sure the information is right in here. If it's not showing correctly, for an example, maybe you're self-insured and, you know, you're not getting the form that shows the spouse or the family information. You'll want to make sure that you had that right information on here. So not only the effective dates up here with the benefits, but also the covered dependents down here. So you can see in my little example, I've got employee plus spouse, but I didn't check that the spouse had coverage. So if you're, you know, have a mistake like that, and, you know, maybe you didn't catch it all year long, they were deducted a different amount, and then they say, hey, my spouse had coverage or something, you can make sure that that stuff is right, or maybe the dates. Make sure those dates are correct when you go to print the forms, and that shows the coverage and so forth, you'll want to make sure those dates are correct, not only on the dependents, but of course on the employees themselves. So that information, check that to make sure it's right, especially if it's not showing up correctly on the forms. Now, a lot of these things you can fix the form, but it might be a good idea to fix the data. So that way, if let's say you delete your forms, maybe there's a whole bunch of changes, and rather than editing individual forms, you may want to fix the employee data so that if you regenerate the forms, it has the right information rather than have to remember, jot it down or something like that. It's already going to be correct. All right. The other thing you'll probably want to look at is the employment information. So in here, you'll have things like these dates for hire dates. These are going to be used when we generate the forms. And were they an employee all year long, or were they hired sometime during the year? Was there a termination? That kind of information may affect what's going to show up on those forms you're going to hand out to the employees. So you'll want to make sure those dates in here are correct. So again, this is where you can see this information. Typically, this isn't something that you're going to be changing on the self-service side. Now, of course, those dates, the employees might see them in self-service, but you're going to update them over here. So maybe the hire date needs to be updated or something like that. You can update that on this screen. And then also the primary position information, make sure this stuff is correct in here. So mine's obviously a little bit older, doesn't really matter, but make sure that the information is correct in here. If you've got, stuff that's going to affect their full-time status and whether they're eligible for benefits, you'll want to make sure the information is correct on this screen as well. If it's not the primary position currently, perhaps they were part-time last year and they've had a change sometime in this year, then you'll want to make sure that information is right in the position history. So if they had a change, I don't have any history on him, but maybe you want to make sure that in last year, whatever the dates are for that particular one, you may need to edit the history if something isn't showing right on the form. So all of this plays into creating those forms and getting that information correct on the employees. All right, I'm going to go click on the settings. We'll talk about some of the things that can also go into the settings here. So the big one, now I'm going to talk about that in a second, but before we generate ACA forms, we want to make sure our benefits are set up correctly, that they are ACA eligible. So I'm going to select one, just so you can see. You'll want to make sure that this box is checked on all of those medical plans that are ACA eligible. So just double check them all. Now, if you've done this before, maybe you've generated for the previous years or something, it's possible, of course, you may have already checked these things, but it doesn't hurt to come in, go to your different medical plans that were available last year, and even the ones for this year, so you can prepare ahead for next year's forms, and just make sure this is checked on any of the medical plans where they are ACA eligible. So double check that is checked correctly on there. All right, and I'm checking one plan, but you can see I have many different plans out here that are that way. So just go through your system. Of course, if there's an older plan that perhaps is no longer available because you switched carriers or something like that, you'll want to toggle this show inactive to make sure you get those plans that maybe stopped last year. Maybe they stopped on December 31st or something, and you want to make sure you have those plans set up correctly as well. So again, just click into the plan and make sure that ACA box is checked off. Okay, so that's some of the behind the scenes stuff you'll need to do in the settings and on the employee records. You'll want to make sure that stuff is correct to the best of your ability before you generate the forms. Of course, you might find things afterwards. That's where to fix it if you need to fix that information. So that's where you can do that there. Now, the other thing that you should be aware of, that it's possible you could have information wrong on your employer, is you might have the wrong, what we call national identifier, the FEIN, and the company name, because this is going to print on the forms. So you want to make sure this information is right. Now, this is not a normal format for a FEIN, so make sure that is right there. So your EIN is correct, and of course the name. If for whatever reason, maybe there's like an Inc. or an LLC or whatever, you may want to make sure the name is correct. That's going to print on the forms, as well as what is your primary work location. That's the address that's going to be used on the forms. So in my situation, it's Richmond here. So I'd want to make sure that the address was correct. Where's that address going to be located? Work locations. I didn't make any changes, so I'll just hit yes there. And here you go. I want to come in here and make sure that the address is correct. So that's what's going to put on your forms. Some people leave the address off because it's not used for most things, but for things like tax forms, like the ACA and W-2s and so forth, this information is used. So again, make sure this is right. You may not have to change your corporate address, but if you just left it blank and all you had maybe was the geocode for payroll, then make sure that information is correct in there. All right, so let's look at actually generating the forms themselves. So that's going to be in your settings here under HR administration. You will see ACA. So this is where you'll go to generate the forms. Now, I don't have them here for this year. So what you would do is, of course, if you've already generated them, you can click into it, but all you'll do is select the employer. If you have multiple, you'll see I would have to do it for both if I do have both of them on there. And then click generate. Now, depending on the size of your company, this might take 30 seconds, a minute. I actually just did it twice. Let me delete one, but it'll take a little bit of time. Give it a chance to actually generate it before you click generate again. Otherwise, you'll have what I had, which is it'll do it twice. It's okay if it does it twice. You can always delete if you did that twice, like I did. All right, but it's going to generate the latest year. Like I can't go back and say, oh, I want to do 2019. I see it's missing. It's going to do last year's forms. All right, so once it generates, then you can click into it. And of course, you'll see up here at the top, the contact name, the first name and last name for the contact person. So whoever that is, their title, whatever their title is, let's just say CEO, and their phone number. Again, whatever their phone number is. I think I might have it for Canada or something. So it's showing it's in the correct format, but let's see if I do 1-800 will work. There we go. So phone number format. Just make sure that information is right. It won't let you save, the right format in there, but make sure the header information is right. Again, that's going to print on your form, your 1094 form. So you want to make sure you have that stuff correct on the top there. And now you'll see down as I go down the different months that are out here. So I had coverage all year long. So I have all months here. Maybe you started in the middle of the year. You just crossed threshold where you have to start offering coverage or something like that. And so you might see, let's say March and forward is, checked off because there was nothing in January and February because you didn't have enough employees or whatever the situation was. So you want to make sure that is correct there. Here you can see I can edit these numbers if I disagree with the total number of employees. Maybe, I don't know, there was some employees you deleted. You asked us to delete it. We cleared it out for you or something. I don't know why you would do that, but, maybe the account is wrong. You could edit these numbers and make it 130 employees or something like that. So that's in there. And here you'll see if it is an aggregate group. So in other words, like mine, where I have the 2 employers. So if they're an aggregate group and I have to need to do that, I could check that box off right there for aggregate group. Let the system know that this is part of a group there. All right, and then MEC offer. So the was it minimum eligibility coverage, something like that. I forget exactly. But that's the if this it does have a plan that offers that minimal coverage. Check that off there. And you'll see here now, I checking these other months because we did it all months. I don't necessarily need to go in there. You'll see I can't edit the numbers in there. But again, perhaps you had an entity that started middle of the year or something like that. Then you may need to check these boxes off here. Again, check with your advisors on that if you need to check it off, let's say from June on, if that's when you acquired another company or something. All right, so you can see that over here. Now, if you would like to see the actual data, there's a couple of things you could do. First off, if you want to see the forms themselves, you could hit download forms, and that would download all 125 forms or whatever number you have there. Just be aware that download may take some time depending on the number of forms. It's PDFs of these, and there's multiple pages on the PDFs and so forth. So it might take a while depending on your connection and everything on how long it takes to download. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on import here because I would like to bring in or look at the information in a spreadsheet. So you can actually download the existing what we just generated by clicking this. It's going to generate a spreadsheet here that I will open up in a second. And this is where you could edit the forms if you need to. So there's not a screen within the system that you can edit it, but you can edit it on the spreadsheet. I'm just waiting for my Excel to open before I can show you what this will look like and how we can edit this. So give me 1 second to switch it over. Zoom in so we can read it all. All right, so here I'm going to share my spreadsheet. And so you should be able to see this Excel. And here you can see that information like I was talking about. Of course, there's the person's name, their social security number, their address, and their information here from B to G is their kind of their demographics and address information. As I mentioned, you could edit it here. If you edit it here, though, it does not go back and update the employee. So might as well update the employee record. Now, if it's just like one employee, say, okay, I'm going to edit the spreadsheet and I'm going to edit the employee record. That way you don't have to worry about it. But, let's say there was 20 people that were wrong, maybe not all the same social, but the address is wrong or something. You might want to just edit their records and regenerate this to get the correct information in there. All right, here you'll see the plan start month. So, what month of the year did the plan start? In my situation, it was January for everybody. You can see that there. All right, so that's the column H there. And then next up is, are you self-insured? So if you are, you'll want to go ahead and say yes in that one. So you are self-insured. Okay, the offer of coverage for the entire year, you can see this. Now, if somebody had a change middle of the year, maybe they were hired, they terminated, something like that, they went part-time to full-time, something like that, that their offer was not for the entire year, they're going to have a blank in this column, just like this one for Veronica here. She has a blank because of a situation. Like I said, maybe she was terminated or she was hired mid-year. So she doesn't have the full year coverage there. All right, so don't worry if there's a blank. But you see that? Here you see the employee's age on January 1st. I believe that's, you need that for self-insurance, so it would populate if you're self-insured there. And then you can see each month. Now you got the offer of coverage code. That's what OOC means. And you can see for somebody who had for the entire year 1E as an example, every month is going to have 1E. Okay, you can see that right there. For that first person all the way January through December, they have 1E. Now this person who does not have a code here, she looks like maybe was not an employee in November and December. Perhaps she terminated in October. So you can see how that works down here. And we've got these 2 months blank. Same thing with this person here. Here's an example of somebody who was hired mid-year. They were hired, looks like maybe in August or July, depending on your, first of the month after 30 days or something like that. So you'll see that appropriately on those different people. All right, so that's going to be your offer of coverage code. All right, next is the employee share for the year. This, of course, is if you're self-insured, you need to have that number there. So if you're not, then you can, leave that blank there. And then here you see the safe harbor code for the year. Now, this one, in my situation, it did not put a code here for the entire year, but it will put 2H, because you'll notice that, like, for this person, they had 2H for every month. So it's going to put that on for the full year. If I go down, I will see, like, here's an example of that person who terminated. She was 2A, she was offered coverage, and then 2A, she was not an employee. So that's the reason why, whatever's happening. 2A, they were not an employee. 2B, I believe, I'm trying to remember, 2D is when they were part-time and stuff. I don't remember all the codes off my head. I do apologize. But these, if you just go to the IRS website, you can look up those codes. There's ones for when they were terminated or not an employee, basically, when they were hired that first month. If they, let's say they were not hired on the first of the month, you didn't offer coverage for the entire month because they weren't an employee, and they'll have the code for that. Or maybe they were part-time for some of the month, you'll have those different codes in there, like 2B and D and so forth. So you'll have those various codes. So you'll want to check those on your employees. Now, this is something I can edit. So, again, I mentioned that you have those hire dates and the term dates on that employment history screen, but maybe you just notice it wrong on one person. Or, you maybe had a situation where they were terminated and they came back after a couple of months. And for whatever reason, you didn't update the system. Maybe you do like a mass layoff or something when it gets slow, and then you hire everybody back. You keep them active in the system. I've seen some companies do it that way. You may need to go through and put in the right codes for that. Right. So you can see those different codes there. And then that's it for the employees tab. Now you'll see the other tabs down here at the bottom. Let's click on this first one. This is the employer information. As I was mentioning, this is grabbing it from the employer setup. So I've got that EIN. The address, you may remember on my work location, the address was blank. The street address was blank. So if it was like 123 Main Street, it should populate there. There's the city, state, and zip. And then the person to contact. Now, I hadn't saved. That's why when I downloaded, it didn't have Ted Lasso's information. If I had saved and then downloaded, it would populate that. But you could fill it out here, upload it in, and it will fill in that information. So you have choices, right? You'll see, of course, their name, their phone number, and their title, those fields you saw on the form in the system there. And then certifications and eligibility, using a qualifying offer method, transition relief, etc. You can mark those with an X. Here's that employee count by month. Again, this is something that you could import. So if you didn't want to check that aggregated group, you can just come in here and XXX down the way and get them all checked off if you want to do it that way. All right. Here is where you would put down the name and the EIN if you are part of a group of the other companies. You don't need to do it for this one because that's on this first one. But if you do have those other entities that all go together in the aggregated group, you need to put their company name and their EIN in here to make sure that it's right. And then finally, if you are self-insured, which I don't have marked in my system, this is where that dependent information is going to show up. So you'd have the employee ID, and then this is the dependent name, his first name, middle name, last name, social security number, date of birth, and then the codes for their coverage for the year. So, excuse me, this needs to be populated for if you are self-insured. It does not need to be populated if you're not self-insured. So it's okay if this is blank if you're not self-insured. All right, so now if you do make changes, of course, you'll want to save your spreadsheet and then bring that back into the system to update it from there. So I'll switch back over into the system so I could make those changes, and then I would just browse and select the file and import it in. As I mentioned, this is going to update the ACA file, but it's not going to go back and update stuff on the employees. So like I mentioned, the names, the addresses, dependent information, all of those things like hire termination, that kind of stuff. It's not going to go back and change all your data. So just be aware of that. Make sure you don't put changes in here and then expect it to go somewhere else, fix it in the system, and then perhaps regenerate the forms. Once you've imported them, you may want to export it again just to see, verify what the system has as a record. And once you're satisfied with that, then you can download your forms. Now, I did this earlier and it took a few minutes. I don't want to waste our demo time on this. I've already downloaded them so I can show you what they look like. Give me one moment to bring those up. Like I said, what it's going to do is going to generate a big zip file called aca.zip. So you may have ones from previous years, depending on where you download your files. You may already have aca.zip in there from last year, or if you've downloaded them before, just be aware, of course, it might rename it, or you might get a thing saying, do you want to overwrite when you download it? So probably a good idea is to move that file out of there in case you download it again, you don't overwrite something. But I've already done that. I'm going to unzip it. I just want to show you what some forms look like real quick. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what the form 1094 looks like. So just give me a second to switch that around. So this is what the 1094 is going to look like. Now, remember, I did not change anything as far as the addresses. and the EIN. So when I look at the form, you'll notice the address is missing, the EIN, not a correct format there, contact information, I never saved it, so it's not populated there. If I had uploaded it or fixed that information ahead of time, this would all be populated right here. All right, here are those employee numbers, 125 forms. All right, is this the authoritative transmittal for this ALE member? Yes. Total number of forms, 125. Are they a member of a group? If I had checked yes, then it would mark that as yes there. All right, and then here's that employee count for each month, and aggregated group indicator would be checked. And then this last page, if you are a member of the aggregated groups, you would see the other names and EINs. Okay, it should be, if you have many more companies in this, I believe it'll generate another page. So if I don't know how many fit here, looks like it's approximately, but it's exactly 29. So if you had 30, you get an extra page. So it will go ahead and generate it on there. Hopefully you don't have that many, but if you do, it's okay. Our system can easily handle it. It's just, you got an extra page. All right, so that's the 1094C. And I'll just bring up an employees one, just pick one at random here, just so you can see what that looks like. And here you go. So here you can see an example of an employee one, 1095C. It's got their name and social and address right up here. Here's the employer information. You'll notice address is blank, so you don't want to fix that stuff there. And then here's their codes for the year. Now, if you did have the employee contribution, then that would be in this row right here. All right, it always prints the instructions. You may want to print, back and forth if you're printing it yourself. If you have covered individuals, you've got this page here, and then the instructions for that. So you get the idea what the forms look like. Might be a good idea to download them after you've looked at the spreadsheet, just to double check that it's looking right before you send them out to your employees. Now, in my PDF viewer, I can edit fields. I'm not going to put my name on there, but I can edit fields. So this is kind of like, I could edit this here. Of course, this is not going to write back into the system. If I change the zip code or I put the street address here, it's not going to update it. All right, so back over here. So that's downloading the forms there. I did want to mention there is one alternative to doing it within the system here, and that's you can use Atrix to generate forms as well. It is a similar process, but not exactly the same. With Atrix, what it does, if you've never used it before, it is a tax filing solution that plugs into our system here. It'd be under payroll. I believe I have it enabled, but it's not configured, so it won't work here. But under your reports, you'll see government reports, and you'll be able to do ACA forms in here. So you'll see 1094, 1095. When you do that, it launches a wizard that kind of goes through the same steps. It's going to allow you to review your company information. So you can see the address and put the contact information in there. And then it's going to show you like those employee counts and the things with the numbers for each month. So it's going to show that. And then you'll see the employee forms. Just like our system, if you edit something in Atrix, just like if you edit the spreadsheet, it does not go back and edit the employee information. So make sure you get that employee information right. You could always, if you fix a bunch of stuff, you can always come in here and generate them again. So you'll see that in there. All right, so that is the 1095, 1094C. So you could do that through here. Of course, you just change the year to 23, and then you would hit accept. So it launches the whole wizard at the very end. You can either print them out yourself and hand them out to your employees, kind of like we're doing, or you can use the system Atrix to have them send them out to your employees, and they do the filing for you. So it does make it a little bit easier. We can handle the filing of this in the system if you use our ACA. If you do this, we can handle the filing for you, but we don't do the printing and stuff like that. So that is ACA filing. The reason we do this now is because if you're doing them paper filing, you're going to print out everything and file the copies with the IRS on paper. They're due at the end of the month. I believe it's the 29th is the due date. So you've got 9 days to do this. If you're going to file electronically, you get an extra month. So still, of course, have to hand them out to your employees, but you get an extra month to actually file it with the government, but you have to file electronically. So just be aware of that out there. Let's go back over to my slideshow. I do mention that here. So paper copies to the IRS. Oh, it's the 28th. I'm sorry, it's 28th. I thought it was 29th. And then furnish the employees by March 1st. But then if you're doing electronic copies, you have till April 1st. That was end of March, but it's actually the first day of April, maybe the end of March is a Sunday or something. So the first day of April is when they need to be electronically submitted. Either way, whether you're doing the paper copy to the IRS or the electronic copy to the IRS, you have to hand it out to your employees by the 1st of March. All right, just real quick here. You'll see here our upcoming webinars. So in a couple of weeks, we're going to talk about advanced dashboards, which is a feature we released in our last release there in the end of January. So in a few weeks here, we're going to talk about that. We'll then talk about Claire, which is our on-demand pay option that you can integrate into payroll. So if you want to use the on-demand pay. And then finally, into April, we're going to talk about offer letters. So those are our next 3 webinars. If you do have any questions about ACA filing, if you're working with a partner, of course, you can reach out directly to your partner and they'll hopefully be able to handle that. If there's a system type issue, your partner will work with us to get that resolved. Otherwise, if you're working directly with us, there you can see our number there, our email address, your success manager will be able to help you out with these things. Of course, we won't be able to provide tax advice, but if, let's say you have a question on how do you import or something, we're here to help you with that. So please feel free to reach out to us with any questions that you might have. And I do want to thank you for joining us today and I hope to see you all in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much.